What's an occupation you're sure no one enjoys doing? My mother's fiber broke on her ATT connection. I called tech support and service to get it fixed. They tell me it would be 3 weeks to get someone out. I made the appointment and hung up. I called Spectrum, the only other provider in her area, and told them if they could get there faster we would switch. They said 2 days. So I called ATT back and told them if they wanted our business they had 24 hours to get there. I also might have told them the 2 service guys can fight to the fucking death. Well, they both showed up the next morning, but Spectrum won. And we had the ATT boxes and modem in a box to give the repair guy. Edit: I'm not sure the type of fiber she had, but it was extremely slow. She had 3 TVs, phone, and internet. If you had all the TVs on different channels, she could barely do a FaceTime. If you were on a phone call, you needed to turn off one TV at least to keep connection. This fiber was sticking out of a box on the wall, and it had a little white shielded fiber that broke off. Spectrum has been rock solid, and my remote software I use to keep her system clean and running is lightning fast now that she is on Spectrum. I had to mail my cancellation in by registered mail. Couldn't cancel in person. The cancellation was effective 10 business days after they received your notice of cancellation. I mailed mine in time for it to coincide with my annual billing date, which was the contract. However, what they said was you need to give them 90 days notice of cancellation even if it was after your contract term. Effectively, the wording of their contract, in 6-point font, said not to rely on any verbal or other communications. The contract was the only thing that mattered. And even though the contract said I'd purchased a 2-year plan, I had to give 90 days plus 10 business days notice, rounded up to the next bill date, and I couldn't give that notice until after my term ended. So even though my contract term was 2 years, the minimum I would be charged for was 2 years and 4 months. I had to fight quite hard and threaten one of those go public type deals for them to finally relent, and they only said they'd do that because I was moving to a city without one of their gyms. I ended up canceling my credit card so they couldn't keep charging me after my contract date, which was 3 months after I'd moved anyways. The kicker was their finance company didn't update their system. So I received a call from a collection agent more than a full year after my cancellation date, saying I was a year behind on payments. I said my membership had been cancelled more than a year before, as I'd moved, and evidently someone didn't do the paperwork. He said it was my responsibility to contact the gym and get them to sort things out. No point in going through the rest of the convo, haha. It was a gym with a precious metal in its name. I'll never go back. I used to move furniture for a rent-to-own furniture store. That includes delivering it, setting it up, and taking it back when the people end their rental or can't pay for it. People who get rent-to-own furniture do not tend to be happy people. I repossessed a vacuum cleaner from a crying woman. I accidentally tore someone's, already owned, couch while repossessing a deep freeze. I removed a fridge from a house, and when we pulled it away from the wall was moving, coated in roaches. I got bit in the ass from a pack of dogs trying to knock on someone's door who had been ignoring our bills and calls, prompting me to get a rabies vaccine. I repossessed a dryer from a woman who said it wasn't working anymore, but when we removed the lint trap it had a year's worth of lint layers stacked in it. She insisted that wasn't the problem, the dryer was broken. I was cleaning up a computer we repossessed from someone, when a pair of enormous antennae appeared from the fan vent. We moved the computer into the box truck outside, set off a bug bomb, and closed the door. The next day we had to sweep a large carpet of bugs out of the truck. Never again. I worked in a pharmacy. I learned so much. I knew most brand and generic names. I knew what the ER would prescribe you if you went in for different reasons, X. Miralax and famotidine for abdominal pain. We knew what diagnosis you had based on what was prescribed, X. Pain meds and stool softener, you just had a baby. We also knew you were pregnant or have cancer before your family knows. I also learned everything OTC. So if you need a splinter out, or weird ingredients for home remedies, I knew exactly what to recommend. I would also suggest some non-medicinal cures that often get overlooked. Ice pack for pain. Pharmacists are incredibly well trained in medicine. If you are having an issue, I would absolutely recommend going to a pharmacist you trust and say, "Hey, if I go to the ER for this, what will they say? Or which OTC medicine for which ailment?" One last bit of advice: if you are not using insurance, you can call all the local pharmacies and say what's your best discount card price for 30 pills at X strength. Each pharmacy is different and I have saved hundreds of dollars for people just by calling around. This is also true for vaccines and compounds. Shit shoveler here, you would be correct. But how bad it is depends on a few factors. 1. The type of shit. 2. Amount of shit. 3. Weather/seasons. The type of shit, for example chicken shit, isn't that solid or dense, making it easy to clean in decent amounts, but dependent on weather it can get wet and make a lot of ammonia, which is enough to cause your lungs to burn. Cow usually is just as loose but in greater amounts and tends to run, so be prepared to scrub walls, and it turns literally any floor surface into muck. Dirt, concrete, hell, even runner matting can become a nasty smelly mud pit with only a few cows. Horses are in the same boat but to a lesser degree, usually due to them being in lower population density. Goats and sheep are pretty equal. They make little pellets that are pretty easy to sweep or wash away but are still pretty soft, so concrete surfaces will need to be scrubbed occasionally. And finally pigs, contrary to popular belief, they are rather smart and organized. They have a spot to use the bathroom, a spot to wallow and a spot to nap. I cannot however speak for those who have had to clean up after a lot of pigs however, but I think it would be in the similar category as cows, just with a higher risk of getting diseases due to their similarity to humans in terms of guts and immune response. The amount makes the job a lot harder. A small amount? Sure, no problem, but multiple inches of bedding? That sucks. And there is 2 types of large amounts. 1. Wet recently vacated pen that needs to be cleaned out quick in order to make it better for the animals, and 2 dry pens that were wet pens but had time to dry and solidify. The waste is lighter but stuck together like glue. And one last thing to consider in terms of amount is location. Is it in a hard to clean pen due to being cramped or hard to access? Expect more time and effort to clean, etc. And finally weather. This can affect all of these things. Excessive heat makes an already tough job tougher but could cause overexhaustion, which can be dangerous. Cold weather can cause wet pens to get stuck together with ice or contract and congeal further, or make using water to clean harder due to ice forming. And finally weather can affect how the manure ferments, making the possibility for ammonia, methane, and a bunch of other nasty stuff. I have 7 years experience. It's a transitional job. You have to really love it to not be wondering about your next job while you move. It's a no-skill job, which means basically everyone is already qualified for it. Although it's not for everyone, I look at it like I get paid to work out, simple as that. It's different when you are not moving with the pizza and beer crew and it's not your stuff. Moving is usually stressful for people, so I also enjoy showing up with a smile and blowing them away with my work. Tips can be good too at times, plus you get offered a lot of stuff. At one job, me and the boys rented a storage unit together and took everything every customer offered us. At the end of the month we would sell the stuff and split the money. You would be blown away by the kinds of things we get for free. I just recently got a full uncut sheet of $2 Canadian bills that were discontinued 25 years ago, for example. I recently left a career job making $18/HR. I work in a local state in the US where that's considered decent money for not having a degree, that I hated for an in-between job at a fast food place making $14 to basically fry fries and wash dishes. It's a demanding job, but the people are cool and I don't have to talk to customers and I'm not responsible for anything. My phone isn't being contacted at all hours over stupid company stuff. My free time is really free and I'm being paid to work out and think my own thoughts. I'm a writer. Obviously it doesn't pay the bills yet, and mindless manual labor is great for thinking about what I'm writing or will write next. I enjoy it. That's a bow position separate from the fa though. I wouldn't touch a customer interaction position with a 10-foot pole. I'm in my 20s, it's okay to coast and I don't mind where I am, as much as my family thinks it's a stupid move. I was miserable with my career job, I had no personal time. Now I do. Problem solved. Varies state to state here in the US, each state sets their certification standards. Pretty much all of them will require high school diploma/GED and then you will need to pass an exam and get experience to qualify for your state license at whatever grade you are going for. Some states do an ABC grade system. In California we have a grade 1 to 5 system with grade 5 being the highest. So here you have to get a job as a OIT, operator in training, and you apply for your trainee cert from the state. CA changed their requirements to require some college for trainees now, but I think literally one STEM class meets the requirement. Your experience clock doesn't start until you get that OIT cert. Then you just work/train at a plant to get your hours and apply to take the state exam when you're ready and move up the ladder. There are separate certs and requirements for wastewater, drinking water, and distribution. Wastewater typically will have the highest requirements because the process is more technical, but they're all good fields. A lot of smaller plants they will want you to get all your certs and be a jack-of-all-water operator. My plant is large and we focus solely on wastewater there. Worked at a Walgreens for a while, it's not an exaggeration to say they staff incredibly lean. Like, ridiculously lean. 3 techs doing the job of 6 to 8. 1 RPH at the height of flu season. I watched a pharmacist with 20 years of experience break down and cry due to the workload. One of the techs I worked with passed out from overworking. She had worked 12-hour shifts back to back for 2 weeks leading to exhaustion. Corporate forced her to take a week off, but that ended up making life worse on everyone else, cause she was the only senior tech trained in half the operational things we had to do. I got hired on as relief, under the impression I'd work 20 HR weeks tops just to support them while they hired another full-time RPH. Turns out they had no plans to do that, and from day one I had a 60-hour work week. I have done many jobs in my life, worked in many demanding fields as I got my degree, not least of which construction, so I don't mind big workloads, but for the pay, peanuts, it was dog water. I do not recommend working in retail pharmacy in any capacity. I wasted a lot of money getting a useless degree, lol. Sadly, posts like this one prove just how little the general public knows about porn production and steez, and show the importance of not only porn education but also general sexual education. Professionals in the US get tested constantly. And I mean literally once a week if they're actively taking shoots. There is a centralized system in place where someone's results can be verified. Getting HSV, HPV, and especially HIV from other tested professionals on a shoot is quite rare and far less likely than getting it from the general population. Statistically, you are far more likely to catch something from your Tinder hookup than you are from a professional, since testing for most people is, at best, a yearly thing. Unless you are rubbing your junk on surfaces freshly coated with HIV/HSV/HPV, you will not be catching any of those. Even then, it's extremely unlikely since they are pretty unstable and degrade quickly on surfaces. If this assumption were true, then nurses and doctors at STI clinics would be riddled with infections from the stuff flying around. 23-year veteran in the industry. The company I work for is great, with full benefits package, retirement, stock purchase plans, 401k match and lots of discount perks on just about anything you can spend money on. I basically get to play video games in a 60,000 pounds truck. Never work nights or weekends. I do start my day earlier than most people, but I also usually get home by 2 p.m. It's not the dirty, smelly job most people think it is. Bad weather and poor equipment can be the only real detriments. I have 2 college degrees, one in business admin, the other in criminal justice. Started out to be a state trooper but saw that risking my life for a $65,000 job at retirement versus flipping dumpsters with a big truck that pays six figures was the better choice for me. My fucking neighbor's lawn care workers. Biggest jerk I've ever met. She told me the first day I met her she'd shoot my dog. Yet my yard is in the capital city downtown, fenced in all around, and her cats shit in my yard every day when they hop the fence. She's just a bitch. Googled her and she's lived off her parents' wealth until they died and took their $500,000 home. They developed the really old neighborhood I live in way long ago. My house is like 115K when I bought it cause it's tiny compared to theirs. Always rude to me and everyone and yelling I've been here for 40 years cause that's how long she lived with them. She's in her 70s and waiting for her to move to a nursing home. I pray for her yard workers honestly. This can mean one of two things, either actually slaughtering and cleaning the chickens, or taking the chicken meat and turning it into tenders, nuggets, etc. to be shipped to consumers. Both are miserable. Chicken companies build their plants in economically depressed areas and work people to the bone for pennies, because there are few options for jobs there. There's a plant by me that does the former process. It absolutely reeks all the time. I can't drive near there in the summertime because the smell is just that overwhelming. A lot of the chickens die during transit from farm to slaughter too because of how they're transported. For the latter, the book The Hamlet Fire covers it really well. A lot of lives lost because of cheap management and the desire for cheap food. There were a ton of health and safety violations at that plant, including cooking and shipping of rancid chicken products, but no one dared to complain about it because it was the only job in a 1-hour radius that paid above minimum wage. Long-distance trucking. Everyone I've met at least does/did it with the idea that they'd make decent money for a couple years to springboard to something else. People might enjoy some aspects of it, some of the experiences, but at the end of the day nobody want to drive all day, rinse and repeat. Lots of time spent away from family. It can be difficult to be physically healthy. They have to pay good money because it sucks and deadlines can be brutal. In the next few decades, it'll be eliminated in developed countries by self-driving vehicles. It will be a real shame that thousands upon thousands of people will lose their job because of that, but I think future generations will look back on it like we look back on awful working conditions from decades past. Working as the only grill cook at a Chipotle. Don't do this for your own sanity. I just quit this job actually. I had such a horrible experience in the past 7 months there. I've never worked a more stressful job, and I was manager of a Subway for a minute. Imagine you have a job to do, with set in stone things you have to get done in certain amounts of time. Now imagine you only have half the amount of time you need. And then also other people make your job harder by getting in your way when they could so easily just make your life easier by doing their jobs. But then you get told their jobs are also sometimes your responsibility. They can't help you if you ever ask, but we're a team, right? And if you ever have a problem with them making your job as hard as possible, well, fuck you, buddy. I always heard you quit the manager, not the job. In this case I quit both. Walked right out on the middle of my shift. Just sick of picking up so much slack and being so poorly treated. Working at a car factory. Unless you end up somewhere like a Ferrari, or some other high-end, handcrafted plant, it's a nightmare. All you hear is chains moving parts overhead, forklifts everywhere, bosses yelling at you for minor shit, having to wake up before the crack of dawn, etc. I worked at Honda plant for 1.5 years in the parts department that held the parts for the plant maintenance crew. I worked 8 hours a day, but the time I woke up and got back home was more of 13 hours a day due to long commute and start time. Only place there that was laid back was where they make the NSX, which was quiet and air-conditioned, but only senior engineers who were hand-picked to go there, and that was far and few between. Not going back there. My mental health tanked to suicidal thoughts of how bad it was for me.